Well, hello everybody. I'm back. I decided I'm going to start doing review videos again. As for the timeline, I'm not going to be doing like a regular scheduled thing where I do like a video every week or every other week or, 2 times a week. I'm not going to be a regular poster. Just whenever a release happens to come out, that makes me want to review it. I almost did the new Riverside album a few weeks ago. I kind of feel like I missed my opportunity to be fresh on that, but I do have some other videos planned out already, and I'd just like to get into it. Before I do, though, I do want to make one correction to the last video I posted, which is my 2022 year-end roundup, top 10 albums of the year. I have no idea how I missed Devin Townsend's Lightwork. That was a great record, and it just completely slipped my mind to even mention it. So, for the purposes of not making that video make me sound like a liar, we'll call that my number 11 album of the year. And my apologies for how I sound and look right now. I've been dealing with a nasty head cold for the last several days. It's in probably its worst phase right now, but we're going to truck on. So, anyway, we're going to talk about the new Haken album, Fauna. So Haken's been one of the most consistent progressive metal bands of the last 20 years. It seems like every release they put out is pretty excellent, really. I mean, from their debut of Aquarius all the way up to The Mountain, which is just one of their greatest works. Most people would, like, at least within the fandom of Haken, would consider those three records, along with Visions, to be perfect. Absolutely perfect records. Affinity split some fans, but personally, I'm a big fan of it. I really enjoyed the direction they took with Affinity. The only albums of theirs I'm not too hot on, and I consider them sort of a dip in the band's quality, were Vector and Virus. And to explain why, my close friend Shane and I are big fans of Haken, and we kind of have this system of, like, dividing Haken's music up to prog Haken, fun Haken, metal Haken, and dark Haken. Haken is at its best when all four of those elements are more or less in balance. When you have a good mix of the prog elements, the metal elements, the dark elements, and you inject a little bit of Haken's sort of trademark fun. But Vector and Virus kind of felt a little like they were taking each of those individual components and giving them a bit too much of a spotlight. Vector was definitely heavy on the metal side, and there were some fun moments on the record, but there wasn't really a whole lot of the band's prog side to be shown. There weren't very many softer moments, there weren't very many dynamic shifts. There were a lot of time signature changes, but there's a lot of time signature changes in Mudvayne, and we don't call them progressive metal, do we? Yeah, it just seemed a little heavy, fun metal, but not focused on the prog or the darker side. Whereas Virus seemed to almost exclusively focus on the dark side and the prog side. Everything was very minor key. The whole Messiah Complex multi-track epic length number was kind of fun, but it just felt so disjointed and so all over the place that it was really hard to follow. Haken really are at their best when they combine these four elements, along with, just really good songwriting, good musicianship. Vector had basically no guitar solos. Virus had basically no riffs outside of, the couple in Carousel. We got to Fauna, and here we are, we're at their new record, and there's been a couple shakeups in the band, most notably the replacement of keyboardist Diego Tejada, who has played on all of their records so far, with Peter Jones. Now, Peter Jones is actually a former member of Haken, so it kind of makes sense for them to bring somebody back into the fold that has performed and written with them in the past. In fact, Peter Jones was around for what the band describes as their demo era. Yeah, he wrote some of the tracks that ended up on the Restoration EP. A lot of the song Crystallized was formed through some of the demos that were recorded and released recently as Enter the Fifth Dimension. I would say the other big shakeup is not a member change, but the fact that pretty much everybody in the band over the last few years has had an opportunity to do their own solo material. Ross Jennings has put out a solo record. And he's put out a record with Neil Morse and Nick Virgilo. Both of the guitarists, Charlie Griffith and Richard Henshaw, both put out solo records within the last 5 years. I think it's safe to say that they've taken enough time apart creatively and focused a little bit more on what they consider their signature styles to kind of come back and bring something a little bit different to the table. And I feel like Haken have done that a bit with Fauna, where, especially because of the replacement of Diego, the keyboard sounds are a little bit different this time around. Not so much so that you would go, whoa, this is a different band, kind of the way that you would, if you're listening to Dream Theater's discography and you go from Kevin Moore to Jordan Rudess. It's not that big of a difference, but you do notice that there's a little bit more of an electronic element to Peter Jones's playing, especially in tracks like The Alphabet of Me, which, feature very heavy use of the synth. Nightingale was the first single, and I think it really does sort of set the tone for what this album is. There is a lot of the dark Haken element. There's a bit of the metal element, but it's a little more subdued than on Vector. There's definitely some prog going on with, like, a lengthy instrumental section, and it's kind of fun. That instrumental section kind of gets you going a little, okay, what are they doing here? This is interesting. That said, though, there is a little bit of a mid-album slump in the quality, with Sempiternal Beings being maybe a couple minutes too long for my tastes. It feels its 8.5 minute length, although the payoff at the end with the big instrumental playout is definitely worth listening to. Like, it's the one section of this album that, since I first heard it, has just been stuck in my head. Beneath the White Rainbow and Island in the Clouds are maybe a little bit more forgettable compared to the singles. Maybe that's just because I've been listening to the singles and I haven't had that much time with these middle tracks yet. But that's also because one of the tracks that wasn't released as a single is definitely hitting way above its weight class compared to the rest of this record. And I would have to say that's the 11-minute Elephants Never Forget. If you took classic Gentle Giant and modern Dream Theater with a pinch of Devin Townsend and Leprous and put it in a blender, you would get this 11-minute beast of a track. I say beast, and I actually kind of mean it here, because while this isn't really a concept album in terms of like there being a big lyrical narrative that stretches across the record, there is a theme here of using the animal kingdom as sort of a metaphor for human existence. And, you have a track like Lovebite, which uses like the Black Widow spider's mating ritual as sort of a metaphor for toxic human relationships. I'm not really sure what the big track that I just mentioned, Elephants Never Forget, is about, but it feels like it's an absolute beast of a track, and it goes through so many little movements and just back and forth between these different parts, and it keeps you on the edge of your seat the whole time. It's such a great track. The album closes with the track Eyes of Ebony, which was written by Richard Henshaw for his father, who passed away during the production of the record. It does have a very somber tone to it, the dark Haken, but it does pick up in the middle, and it does seem a fitting tribute to someone who Richard described as being the ultimate fan of the band. There's a lot of moments where, you could really picture Richard's father being proud of this track because of how Haken-y it is. It's a really good Haken track. It's a very touching way to end the album. I wouldn't rank it among my favorite tracks on this record, but it really does hit you hard when you realize what the lyrical themes are about, and when you listen to it from that point of view, it actually comes across as a pretty excellent track. So ultimately, where do I put this among Haken's discography? Well, I don't know if I would say it's better than their first few classic records. Aquarius, Visions, and The Mountain are just absolutely perfect, and there's not really much that's going to knock those off its pedestal. Affinity, I think fans have sort of grown on it since it's come out, and people now sort of consider it, along with The Mountain and Visions and Aquarius, as one of their better records. And then you kind of have the split to the modern fans who got in through Vector and Virus. I would say Fauna is very much a step above Vector and Virus. Still riding on a lot of what they were doing stylistically with those records. It's still maybe leaning a little too much to the darker side, but it still shows that Haken has a lot to like. I would say that this record is incredibly solid. It didn't blow me away like I was hoping it would, but I honestly can't say that it's a bad record by any stretch. This is one I would probably want to seek out on physical format in some way, and if I had to give it a rating out of 10, I'd say it's a solid 8 out of 10. Definitely up there in terms of Haken's more recent output. Dare I say it's a bit of a return to form? Even though Vector and Virus weren't terrible records, I didn't hate those records, but let's be clear, they were not my favorite Haken records, and I will put Fauna over Vector and Virus. Oh, and let's just have a moment to love the album cover, because, Vector and Virus had that whole Rorschach test thing and a stylized bacteriophage for their covers. Very simple artwork and very iconic in their own way, but I think Fauna just has a really gorgeous looking cover. Very colorful. I think it very much exemplifies what Haken is more than any other cover they've had. That hint of darkness, but just enough, fun, colorful progressiveness. It's a prog rock album cover. So anyway, thank you for watching my review. 8 out of 10? I'd say go pick it up. Check it out on Spotify. Whatever you want to do, I recommend giving this album a listen. Anyway, Low Show out.